Hi, and welcome to Python Talks. I'm Norman McIntyre. Let's get going. So here's your reference information. Spend some time on that reading about the Talks automation project. And you can see that the vision statement, standardized testing in Python. So we've been talking about Python unit testing throughout this whole course, and we're here at one of the getting towards the end, and Talks really builds upon everything we've covered and is going to help with standardized testing. And of course it will build upon the other things we've talked about, such as PyTest. So some skill points related to this. First, Talks is a command line tool, and it aims to automate and standardize testing. Alright, so that's the deal. In fact, in the next lesson, we'll see even more on this automated testing when we talk about continuous integration. But the idea is ease of packaging, testing, and release process of Python software. So it allows you to decide the targets of where you want your code to be installed at. For example, do you want both Python, say 2.7 and 3.7? Do you want both of those, or whatever in between? You can do all that, and it'll take care of the details for you. So skill point number 2, Talks can check that your package installs correctly with these different versions of Python. That's what I just mentioned, like choose the versions you want to support, and it'll make sure that it passes test in those versions. It can run your test in different environments. In fact, it's going to build upon the skills we've already learned talking about virtual environment. It's going to use that as it runs your test. Talks can act as a front end for continuous integration servers, and in fact that's the topic of our final lesson in the course when we talk about continuous integration. So this allows the merging of continuous integration and shell-based testing. Talks falls right into that. So like everything else we've done during the course and that you do in Python, do the install using pip. So you can say install Talks. I want to draw your attention that one of the things it installs is virtual env. And of course we've covered virtual env in an earlier lesson, so we see how it builds upon that. Skill point number 4. Talks uses a talks.ini file for configuration. So it's one of these programs that will check the initialization file, and like all ini files, notice it has a section, for example a section called Talks and a section called test environment, and then you basically set name and value pairs. So for example in this one we see under Talks the environment list that it says you're going to use is Py.2.7 and Py.3.6. So that says that when you run when you run Talks on this test, it's going to run the test in both of those environments. Also, I want you to notice under the test env, notice it will put PyTest, and of course PyTest is going to be put in these virtual environments. And of course we've been using PyTest, and all the code that we've already written and looked at in the course we can now put inside of this, and in an automated manner it would run all our tests. Now how do you create an ini file, that Talks ini file? You can actually use this Talks quick start command, and that'll create an initial Talks ini for you. In fact, here we've got Talks quick start. I'm showing an example running it, and what this does, as we see on the screenshot, is it asks you several questions. So this first question, what Python versions do you want to test against? So it might be you only care about, say, 3.7, Python 3.7, so you choose one. Or maybe you want both Python 2.7 and 3.7, so you choose 2. Or maybe you want it to test against all the versions, so you could choose 3. And you can even choose one by choosing 4. So in this case, for this example, I just pressed the default, which was 3, checking for all versions. The next question it asks, what command should be used to test your project? And notice the default command is PyTest. Well, that's great because we've already been talking about PyTest in this course. And so we know that it has a great foundation for running tests and test fixtures. So it pulls that and will run it by default. Notice the next question, what extra dependencies do your tests have? So if your testing is going to use some other modules, other packages, you could put those dependencies here in this list, or just press enter, and the only dependency it would have is PyTest. And then at the end, notice it will create this file talks.ini, and that'll be there in your current directory. So here's how it looks. If you look at the one we just generated, notice we have some comments to begin with, and then we have this section called talks. And notice since I pressed enter and the default choice was 3, it gives us the environment of all these different choices. And then the test environment, notice the dependencies in this case is PyTest, and of course the command it will run is PyTest. And we know from studying PyTest that when you type PyTest, it's going to run all the files that begin with test and run through the test classes and even the subdirectories. All right, skill point number 6, you'll use this talks command to run your test. And let's say you create a brand new directory and there's nothing in it, and you type talks. Notice the command notice the results you'll see. It says no setup.py file found. So here it's saying, well, it expected to have a setup.py. When I ran this, I was actually in the demo directory, and when you run that, it's expecting to find a setup. Now what's cool about this, remember back to our very first lesson, one of your first exercises was to create a package and send it up to PyPy, and the Python package index. And we're seeing here that this is set up, talks is set up to assume that you've got a package. So here's the typical directory structure, and again, this should be familiar to you from lesson 1. In fact, if you need a refresher, go back in lesson 1. In lesson 1, we actually showed a video of creating a package and uploading it to PyPy. So here, I'm showing, for example, something called demo package, and we have the underscore init underscore py. We have a license, a readme, and the setup.py is what the talks command was looking for just a moment ago, saying it could not find it. So assuming you have all those items put in there, then when you run talks, you'll see it run through all the tests for you. And in fact, on this screenshot here, notice I have, actually this is what your assignment will look like at the end when you do your assignment for this lesson. You can see I'm running in a directory called assignment-8, and we see that it's doing this source distribution make, and it goes through, runs the test. Notice I have something called testcalc.py. There were actually 2 tests in there, and it passed the test. The thing to observe is if all goes well, at the end you'll get this message, command succeeded, congratulations. Now if there is a testing error during this process, then it would stop at that point and give you information about the error. But here it ran through and completed everything. So as a summary, this talks command is yet another piece of our testing infrastructure. You can appreciate how as we've gone through this course lesson by lesson, we've built up our different testing tools, and here we are with talks, really building upon all the tools we've talked about. It makes it where it pulls them up in an automated manner.